Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The Arrival. Humanity's long-held fascination with extraterrestrial life reached its zenith one fateful morning when the world's skies were lit by an extraordinary, shimmering vessel. The ship, nearly 10 miles long and shaped like an intricate crystal flower, hovered above Earth in perfect stillness. Within hours, news networks were flooded with footage and speculation. Yet the ship did not invade, communicate, or threaten. It simply projected a single message across every digital device. Invitation accepted? This cryptic declaration threw the world into a frenzy. What invitation? Who had sent it? Why now? Nations rushed to decipher the signal's origins while satellites tracked the ship's movements. Theories ranged from an elaborate hoax to the long-awaited first contact. For Dr. Elaine Cortez, an expert in xenolinguistics, it was the culmination of her life's work. Summoned to the United Nations headquarters in New York, she joined a team of scientists and diplomats tasked with deciphering the mystery. 2 days later, the ship descended to Earth, choosing the United Nations Plaza as its landing site. Crowds gathered, restrained by military barricades. The world held its breath as the vessel's surface rippled, then unfolded like petals, revealing a delegation of radiant beings. Their forms were humanoid, but their skin shimmered like crystal, refracting light into rainbows. They moved with grace, their luminous eyes scanning the crowd. The leader stepped forward, a tall figure whose translucent crown glowed faintly. In a resonant, musical voice, they addressed the assembly. We are the delegation of Xiner, and we come in peace. Today marks the fulfillment of an ancient pact. We are here to unite with your kind, as is our custom, through the sacred bond of marriage. This union signifies the beginning of an eternal partnership. Rejoice, for Earth has been chosen. The announcement left humanity stunned. Marriage? Between aliens and humans? The Xynorians elaborated, explaining their tradition of matrimonial alliances with other intelligent species as a means to foster trust and collaboration. While they emphasized that the ritual was symbolic, it carried profound cultural significance. The initial human reaction was chaos. Social media exploded with memes, debates, and fears of alien domination. Religious leaders condemned the notion of interspecies marriage as blasphemy, while conspiracy theorists claimed the Xynorians were here to enslave humanity. Yet, amidst the noise there was wonder. What did the aliens truly want? What could humanity gain, or lose? The UN convened an emergency session to discuss the Xenorian proposal. Dr. Cortez argued passionately that this was humanity's chance to step onto the galactic stage. This is not just a marriage. It's an invitation to join a greater community, she said. We cannot let fear dictate our response. After heated debate, Earth's leaders reached a consensus. Humanity would accept the invitation. But the question remained, who would represent Earth in this unprecedented union? To everyone's surprise, Dr. Cortez volunteered. As she stood before the press, she declared, "If this is what it takes to secure peace and understanding with a species beyond our imagination, I will gladly serve. This is bigger than any one of us." The world watched with bated breath as preparations began for the first alien bridal on Earth. The Xynorians worked swiftly, constructing an ethereal crystalline dome in Central Park to host the ceremony. Meanwhile, Elaine studied their customs, determined to honor their traditions while representing humanity with dignity. As the day of the ceremony approached, a sense of awe and anticipation spread across the globe. People set aside their differences to witness history in the making. Elaine, clad in an iridescent gown gifted by the Xynorians, took her place as Earth's emissary. The stage was set for a moment that would forever alter humanity's destiny. Little did they know this was only the beginning. Alien customs and human doubts. Dr. Elaine Cortez awoke early on the day of her first official meeting with the Xenorian delegation. The air in New York City buzzed with anticipation and tension. Crowds had swelled around Central Park's perimeter, where the alien crystalline dome gleamed like a fallen star. People chanted in dozens of languages, holding signs ranging from "Welcome, Xynorians" to "Keep Earth Human." The atmosphere was electric, a mix of hope and trepidation. At the dome's entrance, Elaine was greeted by a Xenorian envoy named Rithla. Smaller and more delicate than their counterparts, Rithla radiated a gentle blue glow that reminded Elaine of the ocean. Their crystalline features shimmered with intricate patterns that shifted as they spoke. "Elaine Cortez," Rithla said, their voice a melodic hum, "you honor us with your courage. The ceremony begins soon, but first you must learn the ways of our union." Rithla led Elaine inside the dome. The interior was breathtaking. Towering crystalline spires cast soft rainbows over a grand hall filled with shimmering tapestries that seemed to pulse with light. A faint, harmonious hum filled the space, as if the dome itself was alive. Rithla explained the ceremony in detail. The Zenorian bridal tradition, called the Vexal, was not a mere symbolic union but a profound exchange of essence. Our bonds are not forged through words alone, Rithla said. The Vexal requires an exchange of energies. It is how we share our knowledge, our emotions, and our trust. Through this, we become one. Elaine hesitated. Exchange of energies? What does that mean for me? Rithla paused, their glowing patterns dimming slightly. It will not harm you, but it will change you. The bond grants understanding, of us, of the universe. Few have experienced it, but all who have described it as transformative. Meanwhile, outside the dome, humanity grappled with its own uncertainties. News anchors dissected every detail of the Zenorian customs, speculating about the implications of their union. Pundits argued about the risks of alien influence, while scientists marveled at the potential benefits of sharing knowledge with an advanced species. Religious leaders were vocal in their opposition. In Vatican City, the Pope delivered a statement warning against the spiritual consequences of interspecies unions. Across the globe, protests erupted, some peaceful, others not. A fringe group calling themselves the Defenders of Earth vowed to disrupt the ceremony at any cost. As Elaine prepared for the ceremony, she was summoned to meet the Zenorian bride and groom, Shirala and Vekran. The meeting took place in a private chamber filled with floating orbs of light. The pair radiated an otherworldly majesty. Shirala's form glimmered with cascading hues of gold and violet, while Vekran exuded a deep, calming blue. Shirala spoke first, her voice a harmonious blend of chimes. Elaine Cortez, we are honored by your presence. Your species' courage and curiosity have inspired us. But before we proceed, there is one final test. Elaine frowned. Test. Vekran stepped forward, his telepathic voice resonating in her mind. The Vexal requires trust, not just between us but within you. We must ensure your heart is aligned with your intentions. Only then can the bond succeed. They extended their hands toward Elaine, and a soft glow enveloped her. She felt a gentle warmth spreading through her mind, as if they were sifting through her thoughts and emotions. Memories surfaced, her childhood dreams of exploring the stars, her struggles as a scientist, and her determination to prove humanity's worth. As the ceremony approached, Elaine couldn't shake her lingering doubts. She retreated to a quiet alcove in the dome to collect her thoughts. The enormity of what she was about to do weighed heavily on her. Could she truly represent all of humanity? What if something went wrong? Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of General Marcus Green, the UN's military liaison. A gruff man with a commanding presence, Green had been skeptical of the Zenorians from the start. "Course," he said, his tone sharp, "are you sure about this? We don't know what these aliens are really after. What if this is all a ploy to control us?" Elaine sighed. "General, I understand your concerns, but fear won't get us anywhere. This is a chance to build something extraordinary. We have to take it." As night fell, the world turned its eyes to Central Park. The crystalline dome glowed brightly, a beacon of hope and mystery. Inside, Elaine stood at the center of the grand hall, flanked by Shirala and Vekran. The air was thick with anticipation. Hundreds of Zenorians surrounded them, their glowing patterns pulsating in unison. Alien guests from other planets had also arrived, their appearances even more bizarre and wondrous than the Zenorians. Some floated, others shimmered like liquid metal, and a few seemed to exist as pure light. The ceremony began with the exchange of gifts. Shirala presented a radiant crystal orb that contained a holographic archive of Zenorian history. In return, Elaine offered the Voyager Golden Record, a gesture that moved the Zenorians deeply. Next came the ritual dances, performed by Zenorian and human representatives. The movements were slow and deliberate, symbolizing the merging of two worlds. As the energy flowed through her, Elaine felt a surge of emotions, joy, sorrow, wonder, all blending into a profound sense of unity. For a brief moment she glimpsed the universe through the Zenorians' eyes, vast, interconnected, and full of potential. But just as the ritual reached its climax, a deafening explosion shook the dome. Crystals shattered and chaos erupted. The Defenders of Earth had struck. The ceremony was under attack. The bride and groom's entrance. The explosion echoed across the city, shattering the crystalline serenity of the dome. Fragments of alien architecture scattered like stardust, and a wave of panic rippled through the gathered crowd. Outside the dome, Sirens blared as authorities scrambled to respond to the sudden attack. Inside, the scene was chaos. Alien dignitaries scattered, their luminous forms flickering with distress, while human delegates crouched for cover. Elaine Cortez stood frozen, her ears ringing from the blast. Shirala and Vecran shielded her instinctively, their shimmering forms glowing brighter as if to deflect further harm. "It's an attack." General Marcus Green's voice cut through the din. He rushed to Elaine's side, his sidearm drawn. Around him, UN security forces scrambled to secure the area. Rithla appeared, their crystalline features shifting into a jagged, defensive pattern. "Defenders of Earth," they said, their voice vibrating with anger. "Their hatred blinds them to the harm they cause." Elaine's heart raced as she surveyed the destruction. While the dome had absorbed much of the blast, the delicate alien tapestries were torn, and the glowing artifacts lay scattered and dimmed. Yet, amidst the chaos, Shirala and Vecran stood unshaken, their presence commanding attention. Shirala raised her voice, a harmonious melody that cut through the panic. "Humans and Xenorians remain calm. We will not allow violence to extinguish our bond." Outside the dome, chaos reigned. The Defenders of Earth, a militant xenophobic group, had infiltrated the area disguised as maintenance workers. They detonated a series of explosive devices near the perimeter, creating a breach in the dome's defenses. Armed with advanced weaponry stolen from black market suppliers, the attackers pushed forward, shouting slogans like, "Earth for humans," and "Reject the alien invasion." UN forces quickly engaged, but the attackers were well prepared. Their weapons fired electromagnetic pulses that disrupted the crystalline structures and alien energy fields, giving them a brief advantage. Inside, Elaine turned to General Green. "We need to stop them before they destroy everything." Green nodded. "Agreed. My team's working on containment, but this isn't a simple raid. They've come prepared." Elaine looked at Shirala and Vecran. "Is there anything your technology can do to help us?" Vecran stepped forward, his voice resonating in Elaine's mind. "We can shield the dome and neutralize their weapons, but we require your cooperation. Trust is essential." With Elaine's guidance, a group of Xenorians and UN technicians worked together to activate a secondary shield generator embedded in the dome's structure. The technology was far beyond anything humanity had seen. Crystalline nodes hummed as streams of light connected them, forming a lattice of protective energy. "This shield will hold," Shirala said, her voice steady, "but it requires time to stabilize. You must protect the perimeter until then." Elaine turned to General Green. "We need to buy them that time." Despite the growing tension, Elaine refused to stand idly by. She grabbed a comm device and coordinated with both human and Xenorian forces, relaying instructions and rallying support. As the defenders regrouped, the attackers attempted to push further into the dome. But this time, the combined efforts of humans and Xenorians turned the tide. Xenorian warriors, typically peaceful, demonstrated remarkable precision and restraint. They used energy-based weapons that immobilized rather than killed, firing beams of light that ensnared attackers in glowing webs. As the battle raged, Elaine spotted the leader of the Defenders of Earth, a burly man with a scarred face and a makeshift exosuit that amplified his strength. He carried a device that pulsed with ominous energy, likely another bomb. That device could destroy the entire dome, Rithla warned, their glow dimming with worry. Elaine's mind raced. She had to act quickly. "I'll stop him," she said, determination hardening her voice. Green grabbed her arm. "Are you crazy? You're not trained for this." "Maybe not," Elaine replied, "but I'm the only one who can get close enough without raising suspicion." Elaine approached the leader cautiously, her heart pounding. She raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "Wait. Please listen to me." The man turned, his scarred face twisted with anger. "Why should I? You're just another puppet for these alien invaders." "They're not invaders," Elaine said firmly. "They came here to offer peace, not domination. Look around you. This violence doesn't solve anything, it only destroys." The man hesitated, his grip on the device faltering. For a moment, Elaine thought she had reached him. But then his expression hardened. "They'll enslave us," he growled. "And you're helping them." Rithla appeared in an instant, their form glowing brilliantly. Without hesitation they leaped onto the bomb, their crystalline body absorbing the energy. A blinding flash erupted, and when it cleared, Rithla lay motionless, their glow extinguished. "No?" Elaine cried, rushing to their side. Shirala and Vecran arrived moments later, their luminous forms dimmed with sorrow. "Rithla's sacrifice will not be in vain," Shirala said, her voice trembling. As the dust settled, the dome's protective shield activated fully, its radiant lattice enveloping the structure. Inside, the damage was significant, but the Xynorians remained resolute. Shirala addressed the gathered crowd, her voice ringing with determination. Today we have witnessed both the worst and best of humanity. Though violence sought to divide us, bravery and unity have prevailed. Let this be the foundation upon which we build our bond. Elaine, shaken but resolute, stepped forward. Rithla gave their life to protect this union. We owe it to them and to ourselves to ensure this partnership succeeds. The ceremony would continue, but now it carried even greater significance. Humanity and the Xynorians had been tested by fire, and though scars remained, they stood together, ready to forge a brighter future. As Shirala and Vekran prepared to make their vows, Elaine knew the true battle was just beginning, the battle to earn each other's trust and prove that unity could overcome fear. A shattered piece reforged. The crystalline dome glowed faintly in the early hours of the morning, its lattice-like energy shield shimmering against the New York City skyline. Despite the attack, preparations for the Vexal ceremony resumed. The Xynorians worked tirelessly, repairing shattered structures and reigniting dimmed artifacts. Humanity, too, rallied. Engineers, soldiers and volunteers collaborated to restore order, their shared efforts a symbol of resilience. Elaine Cortez, still shaken by Rithla's sacrifice, stood with Shirala and Vekran in the central chamber. Around them, Xenorian technicians moved with quiet efficiency, their glowing forms casting soft light over the damaged hall. Shirala turned to Elaine, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. We will honor Rithla by continuing the ceremony. Their essence joins the cosmos now, guiding us toward unity. General Marcus Green entered the chamber, his expression grim but composed. We've rounded up the remaining attackers, he said. The defenders of Earth underestimated the Xynorians' capabilities, and ours. But this isn't over. Their ideology runs deep. Elaine frowned. If we don't address the fears fueling their hatred, more attacks will come. This isn't just about stopping violence, it's about changing perceptions. As the repairs continued, Elaine noticed a surprising development. Humans and Xynorians working side by side with increasing ease. Soldiers communicated through gestures and shared comm devices, while scientists from both species debated strategies to optimize the dome's energy flow. One interaction caught her attention. A young human engineer teaching a Xenorian how to use a welding torch. The Xenorian, in turn, demonstrated a technique for fusing crystalline materials with precision light manipulation. The two laughed as they compared methods, their differences melting away in shared purpose. Shirala noticed Elaine's gaze and smiled softly. See how quickly bonds form when fear is replaced with understanding? As the ceremony start drew closer, Elaine met with the UN leadership and Xenorian delegates to address the larger implications of the attack. The room buzzed with tension as diplomats debated the next steps. We must publicly condemn this act of terrorism, said a French ambassador. If humanity is to be trusted, we must take a firm stand. An elder Xenorian, their form shimmering with age-old wisdom, replied, condemnation alone will not suffice. Fear cannot be silenced by force, it must be dissolved through understanding. Elaine stepped forward, her voice cutting through the cacophony. The ceremony itself is our strongest statement. The world is watching. If we complete the Vexal despite everything, it sends a message that fear and hatred won't dictate our future. To bolster goodwill, Elaine proposed an additional gesture, a human contribution to the Vexal ceremony. After consulting with cultural and scientific leaders, she presented the Xynorians with a symbolic artifact, a seedling of the Methuselah tree, one of Earth's oldest living organisms. This tree has endured for nearly 5,000 years, Elaine explained during the presentation. It symbolizes humanity's resilience and our commitment to nurturing this bond. The Xynorians accepted the gift with reverence. Vekran, his deep blue form pulsing with gratitude, said, "This gesture speaks volumes. We will ensure this seedling flourishes among our own." As dusk fell, the grand hall filled with attendees once more. Human dignitaries, alien ambassadors, and representatives from both species gathered in solemn anticipation. Outside, billions of people tuned in to the broadcast, holding their breath as the ceremony resumed. Shirala and Vekran took their places at the center of the hall, their luminous forms radiating calm. Elaine stood nearby, a symbol of humanity's participation. Around them, Xenorian singers began a hauntingly beautiful chant, their voices blending into a harmonious wave that resonated through the chamber. The first stage of the Vexal involved a ritual exchange of energies. Shirala and Vekran extended their hands toward Elaine, inviting her to join. This step requires you to share a fragment of your essence, Shirala explained. It will not harm you but will bind you to us in understanding. Elaine hesitated, then stepped forward. As their energies intertwined, she felt a profound connection, a surge of knowledge and emotion that transcended words. Memories of Rithla's sacrifice, the Xynorians' history, and their shared hopes flooded her mind. Just as the ceremony reached its emotional peak, a sudden commotion broke out near the entrance. A lone figure, a human, rushed forward, shouting incoherently. Security forces subdued him quickly, but his actions caused a ripple of unease. Elaine approached the figure, her heart sinking as she recognized his uniform, a rogue UN operative. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "They're manipulating you," he spat. "You don't see it now but you will. We're trading our freedom for their lies." Elaine turned to the crowd, her voice clear and unwavering. "We've faced fear and hatred today, some of it from within, some from without. But if we allow those forces to dictate our actions, we'll lose what makes us human, our capacity to grow, to connect, and to hope." She gestured to Shirala and Vekran. "The Xynorians came here not to conquer but to collaborate. Their traditions may seem strange, even intimidating, but so do ours to them. This ceremony isn't about losing our identity, it's about expanding it." With renewed resolve, the ceremony continued. Shirala and Vekran made their vows, their voices resonating in a harmonious blend of light and sound. The final step involved planting the Methuselah tree seedling in a crystal vase filled with nutrient-rich soil from both Earth and Xenori. As the tree's roots intertwined with the alien soil, a soft glow emanated from the vase, symbolizing the merging of their worlds. As the ceremony concluded, Elaine stood with Shirala and Vekran, their luminous forms casting a warm light. Outside the dome, crowds cheered, and the mood shifted from fear to celebration. "We have much work ahead," Shirala said, "but tonight marks the first step of many." Elaine nodded. "Together we'll prove that unity is stronger than fear." The broadcast ended with a panoramic view of the dome, its crystalline structure glowing brightly against the night sky, a beacon of hope for a united future. Shadows of doubt. The week following the Vexal ceremony felt like a fragile calm after a storm. The world was still reeling from the chaos of the attack, but the ceremonial union between humanity and the Xynorians had sparked a glimmer of hope. News channels across the globe hailed the event as a historic moment, a new era of cooperation. Yet, behind the celebrations, the seeds of doubt still lingered. Elaine Cortez sat in her office, staring at the global reports streaming in on her screen. For every positive story about the union between humans and Xynorians, there were 10 more articles questioning the true motives of the alien species. The defenders of Earth had been quiet for now, but she knew it was only a matter of time before their ideology sparked another wave of violence. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of her communicator. She answered quickly. "Elaine, we need to talk," came the familiar voice of General Marcus Green. "Of course, General. What's going on?" Elaine arrived at the UN Security Command Center an hour later, her mind already racing with possibilities. As she entered the high-tech facility, she was greeted by Green and a group of intelligence officers huddled around a holographic display. "What's happened?" Elaine asked. Green's face was grim. "It's a series of coordinated protests. Not just here in New York but worldwide. But they're not just protests, Elaine. There's something more dangerous about them." He tapped a few buttons on the console, and a map of the world appeared. Red dots began to blink across major cities: Paris, London, Beijing, Rio de Janeiro, and more. These protests are being organized by several fringe groups, but this one is different, Green continued, zooming in on a particularly large gathering in Berlin. "They're not just chanting anti-alien slogans. They're taking action. Violent action." Elaine frowned. "How bad is it?" "Bad," Green replied, his voice strained. "There's word that some of the protesters have access to advanced weaponry. EMP devices, disruptors, even bioweapons." Elaine felt a chill run down her spine. The defenders of Earth had always been a fringe element, but if they had managed to obtain that kind of weaponry, the stakes had just gotten much higher. As the days passed, the protests escalated into full-scale riots. People clashed with law enforcement, shouting vitriol at both the Xynorians and the human leaders who supported them. Despite the Xynorians' best efforts to maintain peace, it became clear that the trust they had worked so hard to build was beginning to erode. Elaine sat in a small conference room with Shirala and Vekran, the two Xynorians quiet as they reviewed the situation. Shirala's radiant glow seemed dimmer, as if the weight of the escalating violence was beginning to take a toll on her. "This is not the way forward," Shirala said, her voice tinged with sadness. "We have done nothing but offer peace, yet this is the response." Elaine took a deep breath. "I know. It's hard to believe, but we have to keep fighting for what's right. We can't let fear win." Vekran, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "The defenders of Earth are not the majority. But they are vocal, and their influence grows as long as fear remains in the hearts of the people. We must find a way to address that fear." Elaine looked at him, her mind working quickly. What if we could show humanity what they really fear? Not aliens but their own ignorance? If we could reveal the truth of the Xynorians, who they are, why they're here, maybe we can shift the narrative. Shirala tilted her head, her eyes glowing faintly. "You speak of transparency, of truth. But can truth alone stop fear?" The idea of a global broadcast wasn't new, but this would be different. Elaine, General Green and the Xynorians began planning a massive event, a direct address to the world, one that would feature the Xynorians speaking about their history, their culture, and their intentions for humanity. The aim was to counteract the lies that were being spread about them, to humanize them in the eyes of the public. But as the event neared, tensions continued to rise. Even within the UN, the growing pressure to take a harder stance against the Xynorians was palpable. The security forces were under immense strain as riots spread across continents. World leaders who had once embraced the Union now found themselves caught between their moral compass and the fear of public backlash. Elaine sat in the war room once more, staring at the holographic projections of the violence unfolding around the globe. She rubbed her temples in frustration. This wasn't just a diplomatic crisis, it was a global identity crisis. Were humanity's fears of the unknown stronger than the ideals of cooperation they had once cherished? "The broadcast is set," Green said, breaking her thoughts. "But if this goes south, we may lose more than just public trust. We might lose the peace itself." Just hours before the global broadcast was scheduled to air, Elaine received an unexpected visitor, an emissary from the Xenorian Council. The emissary, a dignified Xenorian named Elora, approached Elaine in the middle of a tense briefing session. She was tall, with an elegant, translucent form that shimmered with a soft, ethereal glow. "Elaine Cortez," Elora began, her voice a soft melodic hum that resonated in the air, "we have heard of your plans and we come with a message from the Council." Elaine stood up to greet her, sensing the gravity in Elora's tone. "What is it?" Elora's form flickered as she spoke. "The Council has decided that it may be time for a different approach. We have seen the growing resistance, the deepening fear. While we do not wish to interfere in human affairs, it may be time for us to show our true capabilities. The world needs to understand that we are not powerless in the face of these threats." Elaine felt a pang of unease. "You want to retaliate?" "No," Elora responded quickly. "We do not wish to fight. But we can offer a demonstration of our power, enough to show the world we will not stand idly by. A show of strength, not as a threat but as a signal." Elaine looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of her words. A demonstration could escalate the situation even more. It could play into the hands of the defenders of Earth. "We're trying to win hearts and minds, not fuel their fear." Elora's glow flickered, as if contemplating the complexity of the situation. "Perhaps you are right. But understand this, Elaine Cortez. The Xynorians do not fear war, but we are not here to fight. We are here to protect. If the path to peace requires us to step aside for a while, we will. But we will not let humanity destroy itself over fear." Elaine took a deep breath, feeling the enormity of the choice she had to make. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about whether humanity and the Xynorians would survive this trial together, or whether they would fall into the same destructive patterns that had plagued Earth for centuries. "We will proceed with the broadcast as planned," Elaine said finally, her voice resolute. "But we'll also need your help, your continued presence, to show the world that this is not a battle for supremacy. It's a fight for understanding." As the broadcast began, Elaine stood alongside Shirala, Vekran, and Elora, each of them projecting calm and determination. The eyes of the world were upon them. This broadcast, this moment, could either save or doom everything they had worked for. The words they spoke would be heard by millions, but their actions would speak even louder. The choice was now out of their hands. The crucible of truth. The global broadcast began at precisely midnight GMT, when the largest possible audience across the world could tune in. The air in the UN Security Command Center felt thick with anticipation as Elaine, Shirala, Vekran, and Elora took their positions before the camera. News channels across the globe were ready to carry the transmission, and for the first time in history, both humans and Xynorians would speak directly to the world. Elaine could feel the weight of the moment settle heavily upon her shoulders. The room was silent save for the occasional hum of equipment, but the tension was palpable. Everything hinged on what happened here. Could they unite the world, or would this broadcast simply become another point of contention in a fractured world? A countdown flashed on the screens around them, and the soft hum of energy filled the air. The transmission had begun. Elaine stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with the gravity of the moment. Good evening, citizens of Earth. My name is Elaine Cortez and I stand before you today as a representative of humanity. But more than that, I stand before you as someone who believes in the future we can build together. A future that is not dictated by fear or mistrust, but by unity and cooperation. The camera shifted to Shirala, her luminous form glowing softly in the dim light of the stage. She stepped forward, her voice resonating with a calm strength that could not be ignored. We are the Xynorians, a people whose history spans millennia. We come from a distant world not to conquer but to share, to build, and to grow. We have lived through trials of our own, trials that tested our ability to trust and to forgive. And we have come to offer that same trust to you, humanity. Her words were measured, but they carried the weight of her people's collective experience. Every syllable was a promise, every pause an invitation to take their hands in the hope of a better future. But as Shirala spoke, a subtle unease began to stir within Elaine. There were countless eyes upon them, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the broadcast wasn't going as smoothly as they hoped. From the corners of her vision, she could see the faint flickers of news feeds showing live protests erupting in cities around the world. There were no riots yet, but the message was clear: this was not a universally accepted peace. Then, the transmission shifted to Vekran, his deep blue glow flickering with a certain urgency. He raised his hand slightly, signaling that he too had something to say. Humanity stands at a crossroads, Vekran's voice boomed, rich and sonorous. You are at a tipping point where fear can either fracture the future you've begun to build, or it can be embraced like the shadow that it is and then let go. The defenders of Earth spread their message of terror and suspicion, but it is an empty one. Their cries are rooted in a past that humanity has already moved beyond, in a fear of the unknown that blinds them to the possibilities ahead. Elaine could feel the shift in the energy around her, as if the entire world were holding its collective breath. She glanced briefly at the feed. Protesters had gathered in Berlin, Tokyo, and Rio, their chants now growing louder, more forceful. They weren't just opposing the Xynorians anymore, they were directly confronting the very ideals of cooperation that had been their collective dream. Vekran paused for a moment before continuing. We will not fight you. That is not our way. But know this, we will not leave and we will not allow your hatred to turn this world into something unrecognizable. Our presence here is not a mistake. It is a choice, one that we have made because we believe in the future we can create together. A sudden flash appeared on the screen, a breaking news report. Elaine's stomach tightened. It was a live broadcast of the protest in Berlin, where the crowd was growing out of control. What had once been a peaceful demonstration had turned violent, with demonstrators hurling objects at the armed forces. The situation was deteriorating fast. Elaine didn't let her growing panic show. She knew that the broadcast had to continue despite the tension, despite the chaos that was rapidly unfolding. She turned to Elora, who had remained silent until now. The Xenorian emissary stepped forward, her elegant form glowing even brighter in the dim light. Humanity faces a choice now, one far more critical than even we anticipated, Elora said, her voice soft yet firm. This moment will define not just your species but ours as well. For in unity we find our strength. But in division we risk the unraveling of all we have worked to achieve. We ask you to see us not as invaders, not as strangers to be feared, but as allies. Elaine took a deep breath, steadying herself. There were millions watching now, but her eyes kept returning to the violence erupting on the screens behind them. Every second was precious. Fear is a powerful thing, Elaine said, her voice tinged with resolve. It makes us see enemies where there are none. It makes us tear down the very things that could save us. But we cannot let fear win, not now, not when we've come so far. We cannot allow it to dictate who we are and what we can become. As Elaine finished her speech, the world waited in silence. The broadcast continued, but across the globe, chaos was bubbling beneath the surface. In Berlin, the police began to clash with rioters. A few protesters had managed to sneak through the barricades, and a small group had managed to infiltrate a nearby military facility. The protesters, some wearing masks, had staged a well-coordinated attack using EMP devices, temporarily disabling critical infrastructure. It wasn't just a protest anymore. It was a direct challenge to the fragile peace that had been forged between humanity and the Xenorians. Elaine's heart sank as she watched the news feeds flash before her eyes. This wasn't just about the defenders of Earth anymore, it was about a larger, more dangerous force that threatened everything they had built. The very ideals they had fought for were being tested in real time. The broadcast is doing its job, General Green's voice came through on the comms system. But the situation in Berlin is escalating. We might have to pull out. As the broadcast continued, the crowd in Berlin grew more agitated. The violence had spread to other cities, but amidst the turmoil, something unexpected began to happen. A small but powerful shift started to take place. In the wake of Elaine's words, thousands of people, ordinary citizens not part of the organized protests, began to take to the streets in peaceful solidarity with the message of unity. They stood outside the barricades, holding signs of peace, demanding an end to the violence. People began to realize that the message being broadcast wasn't just for the Xenorians, it was for humanity itself. They had a chance to choose differently. Back in the command center, Elaine watched as the number of peaceful protests began to grow. There was still danger, but the weight of the broadcast, of the truth they had shared, was slowly having an impact. The darkness hadn't disappeared, but there was light beginning to break through. The world, it seemed, was finally listening. And the future, for all its uncertainty, had a chance. A new dawn. The events following the global broadcast moved with the urgency of a storm, yet in their wake, a fragile sense of hope began to grow. The violence that had erupted in Berlin, Paris, and beyond didn't stop immediately, but something within humanity's collective consciousness had shifted. The broadcast had done more than simply convey a message. It had sparked a movement, a ripple of awareness that spread like wildfire. People who had once feared the Xenorians now turned to their leaders and asked questions. They demanded action, but not the kind of action born from hostility or distrust. It was an action born of understanding, of empathy, and of a genuine desire for peace. Elaine sat at her desk in the command center, watching the news as the protests continued to shift in tone. What had started as violent uprisings were now becoming peaceful demonstrations. In cities like New York, Mumbai, and Cape Town, people stood in solidarity, waving banners of unity, holding up signs that read, "We are not afraid." The brief calm that had followed the broadcast was soon shattered by an attack that would change everything. The defenders of Earth had been regrouping, and now they made their move. It wasn't just another protest or skirmish, it was an all-out assault. Coordinated cells of extremists attacked key infrastructure across the globe, using the very same EMP technology and disruptors that had been displayed in Berlin. But this time it was on a much larger scale. Power grids were taken offline in major cities, transportation networks were crippled, and the global communication systems were nearly brought to a halt. The attacks were precision strikes, targeted to sow chaos and fear at the highest levels. Elaine's heart sank as she saw the news reports flood in. The Xenorians had been blamed once again, though there was no evidence to suggest their involvement. It was a tactic meant to turn humanity's anger back onto their new allies. "General Green," Elaine said, her voice sharp as she stood, gripping the edge of her desk. "How bad is it?" "Bad?" The general's voice crackled through the communicator. "The cyber attacks are crippling our ability to respond. The Xenorians are trying to help, but they're limited in what they can do without revealing their full capabilities. We need to regain control of the situation and fast." Elaine's mind raced. The world was on the edge of total collapse, and she knew this was no longer just about defending the peace, it was about survival. Meanwhile, at the Xenorian embassy, Shirala and Vekran were engaged in a tense discussion. The Xenorians had been monitoring the escalating attacks, and they knew that they were walking a razor-thin line between ally and enemy. "We must do something," Shirala said, her eyes flickering with concern. "The defenders of Earth will use this to fuel their hatred, and if we stand idly by, it will only confirm their worst fears." Vekran nodded gravely. "We have tried to foster peace through words, but it may now be time to demonstrate what we are capable of, not in retaliation but as a warning." Shirala sighed. "We will not be drawn into violence, but there are others who might see this as the last chance for humanity. Some of our people are already discussing the use of our full capabilities." Elaine entered the room just as Shirala's words hung in the air. The atmosphere was charged, tense with the weight of what was being discussed. "I heard," Elaine said quietly, her gaze turning to the two Xenorians. "I understand your desire to protect humanity, but I'm asking you not to act in haste. If we respond with force, we risk losing everything we've worked for." We cannot become the very thing we are trying to stop. Shirala and Vecran exchanged a long glance before Shirala spoke again. We are aware of the consequences, Elaine. But sometimes a demonstration of strength is necessary. Not to harm but to remind. Elaine's heart skipped a beat as she realized what they were suggesting. A demonstration. What kind of demonstration? Vecran's eyes darkened. A controlled display of our power. Not to attack but to remind the world that peace is a choice, not a weakness. Elaine closed her eyes, considering the enormity of the decision. She knew that the choice before them was one of balance, a delicate one. If they didn't act, the extremists could win. If they did act, they risked confirming every fear that had led to the uprising in the first place. But in the end, she knew there was only one thing they could do. The Xynorians agreed to Elaine's plan, and a series of demonstrations were set up in key locations around the world. Rather than attacking, the Xynorians chose to perform controlled, visible acts of power, disabling the EMP technology that had crippled Earth's infrastructure, restoring power and communication to cities on the brink of collapse. But the demonstration wasn't just about strength, it was about trust. The Xynorians displayed their ability to destroy, but they chose not to. Instead, they used their capabilities to heal. It was an act of defiance against those who would destroy humanity's future. The world watched as city after city regained power, the lights flickering back on after days of darkness. For the first time, humanity saw the Xynorians not as invaders or oppressors, but as protectors. The message was clear. The Xynorians could conquer the planet if they wished, but they had chosen not to. As the violence subsided and the last of the attacks were quelled, Elaine stood on the balcony of the UN headquarters, looking out over the city. The lights of the world were once again burning bright, and for the first time in weeks, the future seemed less uncertain. Shirala and Vecran approached, their expressions unreadable but full of quiet strength. It is not over, Elaine said, her voice carrying the weight of the responsibility that still lay ahead. But we have made it through the first trial. Now, we must ensure this peace is something we can build upon, not something fragile that will crumble at the first sign of fear. Shirala nodded. The future is never certain, but it is something we must create together. Humanity has taken the first step, but the journey will require all of us. Vecran placed a hand on her shoulder. Together we can face the challenges ahead. We will not be the rulers of this world, but we will be your allies as long as you allow us. Elaine nodded, feeling a sense of quiet relief wash over her. There was still work to be done, still challenges to face. But for the first time in a long while, she believed in the possibility of a future where humanity and the Xynorians could walk side by side. Not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals. Together. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. The seeds of a unified future. As the world slowly returned to normal, the echoes of the violent protests that had nearly torn humanity apart began to fade. But the scars left behind would take time to heal. The fear that had once gripped humanity was still present, though its power had waned. Now the focus turned to what came next, the rebuilding of trust, the forging of an enduring partnership between humans and Xynorians. Elaine stood on the balcony of the UN headquarters once again, but this time the city felt different. The atmosphere was no longer charged with tension, but rather with the faint hum of hope, a collective breath held in anticipation of what might come. Below, people were no longer shouting at one another in anger, but instead engaged in conversations, learning about the other's culture, history, and fears. There was still distrust, but it was slowly being replaced by curiosity, and with curiosity came understanding. Do you think they will ever fully accept us? Shirala's voice broke into Elaine's thoughts, soft and contemplative. Elaine turned to face her. The Xynorian ambassador's form shimmered faintly in the evening light, her features peaceful but tinged with concern. She had become more than just a diplomat, she had become a friend. Together they had faced the darkest moments of humanity's history, and now they stood on the brink of something new. Some will, Elaine replied with a slight smile. Others will take longer. But in the end they'll see the truth. Not all at once but eventually. Vecran joined them, standing beside Shirala. His deep blue skin, adorned with glowing patterns of light, gave him an otherworldly presence, yet his expression was grounded, almost serene. The process of healing has already begun, he said, his voice like the sound of wind through ancient trees. It will take time, yes. But it is not the speed that matters, it is the commitment to the path. You, humanity, have already shown that you are willing to step forward. Elaine looked out over the horizon, the glow of the city's lights stretching as far as the eye could see. I never thought I'd live to see this day. When the Xynorians first landed, the world was on edge. Fear and suspicion ran rampant. I never could have imagined how it would all turn out. Shirala nodded. In the beginning we were the unknown, the feared other. But now we are here as part of your world as partners. There are no guarantees in this process, but it is a beginning. The Xynorians had kept their word. They had provided the technology needed to restore the world's failing energy infrastructure. They had shared their knowledge of advanced medicine, which had saved countless lives, and their environmental techniques had begun to heal the planet's most devastated regions. There were still nations that were wary of the alien influence, but the majority of the world had chosen to embrace their new allies. As the months passed, new alliances formed, both between nations on Earth and between humanity and the Xynorians. Joint missions were planned to explore the stars together. What had once been a solitary human venture into space now had the promise of interspecies collaboration. The world would no longer be bound by the limitations of one species, but instead, the collective power of two civilizations working together toward the stars. But this future was not without its obstacles. There were still those who clung to the old ways, those who sought to fracture the fragile peace that had been built. Some of the defenders of Earth had gone underground, their voices growing louder in certain regions. They whispered of betrayal, of an alien takeover. But now their numbers were dwindling, their reach narrowing. Their power was no longer as pervasive as it once was. Still, the world had learned a hard lesson. Trust was not something that could be easily earned or easily broken. It had to be built, piece by piece, in moments of conflict, in moments of doubt, but also in moments of courage. A year after the broadcast that had changed the course of history, the United Nations held a global event to commemorate the first anniversary of the Earth-Xynor Alliance. It was held in a grand plaza in New York City, with dignitaries from every corner of the world in attendance, alongside the leaders of the Xynorian delegation. Elaine stood at the front of the stage, watching the crowd that had gathered from all over the world. The plaza was filled with people of all races, all backgrounds, side by side with the Xynorians, each person a testament to what they had accomplished together. Large holograms hovered above the stage, displaying the shared history of Earth and the Xynor Alliance, their intertwined paths now forever a part of each other's story. I never imagined I'd be here, Elaine said softly to Shirala, who stood next to her, a quiet smile on her face. It's hard to believe how far we've come. Indeed, Shirala agreed. But it's also a reminder that change is not an event, it's a journey. And today we celebrate the journey you, humanity, have chosen. The crowd erupted into applause as the speakers continued to share stories of their combined progress. The Earth's environmental recovery, the new medical treatments that were saving lives, and the educational exchange programs between their peoples. The Xynorians had taught humans advanced techniques, while humanity had shared their creativity, their art, and their unique resilience. Both species were learning from one another, forging a future neither could have imagined on their own. Later that evening, Elaine, Shirala, and Vekran stood together beneath the stars. The night air was crisp, and the city lights shimmered below like a sea of fireflies. The first joint mission to the stars was now in its final stages of preparation. Earth and Xynoria would soon explore the vastness of space together. What had once been an impossible dream was now a shared reality. Do you think they'll be ready? Elaine asked, looking up at the stars. Shirala smiled softly. They are ready. Your people have already proven their resilience and their capacity for greatness. The question is no longer whether they are ready, it is whether they are willing. I think they are, Vekran replied. We have shown them that together, we can accomplish what neither of us could alone. This is not the end of our story. It is only the beginning. Elaine nodded, the weight of the moment settling upon her. It was a moment of triumph, but also one of responsibility. The future of this new alliance was not something to be taken lightly, nor was it something they could take for granted. The road ahead would be long, but she now believed in the possibilities of tomorrow more than ever before. As the three of them gazed up at the stars, they knew this. The future would not be easy, but it would be built on the foundation of trust, courage, and cooperation. They had chosen to stand together, and in that choice, they had given birth to something greater than either species had ever known. And so, humanity and the Xynorians began their journey into the stars. Not as conquerors, not as strangers, but as partners. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that the greatest strength they possessed was their unity. It was, at last, a new dawn. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.